encourage curiosity, model the curiosity, and keep the channel open the whole time.
Everybody, welcome to this episode of Dadnormous. I'm very, very happy to be with Mickey Fehér today. Thank you so much, Mickey, for joining us. I know you're heading on a holiday with the family soon.
Yeah, in about 3 hours.
I really appreciate you taking time today. So I'll ask you to just share your experiences about where you are in your life and where you are in your life as a dad today.
Great. Okay. So, my background is I'm a psychologist, and this already kind of starts us off because I come from this family where we have like 4 generations of rabbis and psychologists, which, it sounds, yeah, it sounds really good, but it also has, a certain price and heaviness surrounded. Everybody is very psychologically savvy in my family, and everybody's ready to analyze everybody. So I kind of grew up wanting to get out of this. And, I said, the one thing I'm not going to do is to become another psychologist, which then I promptly did. So interestingly, I turned into a psychologist, but when I graduated, I still resisted. And I said, no way, I'm not going to be a psychologist. So I'm going to go into business. So I started, a number of companies back in Europe. I worked for a big corporate trainer and a coach. Today, I actually work a lot with men and kind of redefining what it means to be a man in 2020, manhood, masculinity, our relationship with women, and our roles as fathers and parents and spouses and leaders. And I have 2 kids. One of them is 17, the other is 15. And I actually put them through one of the hardest things, or at least that's the way I think about it, or that's the way they thought about it at the time, especially because about 5.5 years ago, we packed up the family in Europe and we moved all of us here, my wife and the kids, and it kind of restarted. It pushed the restart button on our life. I think we have tremendously benefited from the whole experience, but it was incredibly difficult as a father and as a parent. And I can say more, but maybe that's kind of the preamble.
We'll get more into it. And at the time, they were what, 12 and 9 or so, and that.
Yeah. So at the time, one of them was 12 and the other was 10. Yeah.
So yeah, tough ages to move. Not that there's ever a good age to move, but definitely tough ages to move on the precipice of a teenager, and quite a jarring shift. And I think, one of the things I enjoy about our conversations you and I have had, because we are looking at things from a consciousness perspective and mindfulness, is how can we all take the opportunity to learn? And this includes from situations that we may be uncomfortable in, of course. And so I'm excited for you and for the family to get a chance to head back for a little while, just to take a little reprieve from New York. So thanks again. I appreciate it. So I'll ask you to take a moment and think back, if you can, 16 or so years ago, obviously, I believe. And I know you lived in a few places, so I'm not sure what the timelines are specifically. And can you tell me a little bit about when you and your wife, when you first found out you were expecting, what was your feelings? Like, how did you feel in that moment when you first learned you were going to be a dad?
Yeah. So that's a good story. Basically, we are one of those couples that we know each other, with me and my wife, from high school. And again, it's something very unusual. I even fought it for a long time because I was like, come on, I'm not going to be one of those couples, like we know each other from high school and then, high school sweethearts forever together. And so, we never went out when we were in high school, and then, we kind of went separate ways, but we met again. And so when I was like 21, I already was together with my wife. And so it took me almost like 8 years to digest, like, no matter whether I think, this is right, or, I should be doing this or should be doing that, we are just right for each other. And so after almost like 8 years in the relationship, I proposed to her. And we planned this wonderful holiday that we were going to go for honeymoon to Asia, Eastern Asia, and we were going to have this amazing, crazy trip. And just about to buy the tickets, and she comes to me and she says, "Well, I'm pregnant." Oops. And so the wedding was kind of planned on the way already. We didn't think of we didn't plan for this, so it kind of happened. So we had to like readjust the holiday and stay in Hungary instead, and it all worked out beautifully. It was kind of like a gift, like a surprise. And I think at that point I was already kind of ready for it, and she was extremely obviously open to the idea. So it was just graceful happiness at that point.
That's great. And were you excited, nervous, all of the above? Like what was present for you emotionally in that moment?
Yeah, I think I just didn't know, like I had a concept of, I had a really good father myself. I had some good mentors. I have always been into the idea of being with kids and helping them. So, there's a natural inclination or a positive stance in me. But when I found out that I'm going to have a child, I didn't think I understood what that means. I mean, I got it, like, verbally, conceptually, I knew that it's happening, but I couldn't quite make anything out of it until, I was there with my wife in the hospital and the baby literally came out and I was standing there and I saw it. And then it began to kind of dawn on me. And then still, it's interesting. One of my mentors said this to me when I was kind of telling him about the dynamics in our family. And, like between me, my wife, my son, and myself. And he goes, it's a triangle. So you, her, and him. And, at some point when a baby is born, then she and the baby, they're really close. And you're kind of out there. So whatever you had, the two of you is done, is dead. Now it's a triangle. It's no longer this, pair that you had. So you're going to reinvent everything. And that's what kind of happened to us. Like I was learning to be in that triangle. Okay. and slowly finding my way into it and getting closer to both of them.
That's great. And I think those evolutions are part of the life experience overall, and certainly for us as dads, part of that experience, because as you said specifically, when the baby literally shows up, it becomes very, very real. Someone I spoke to recently was just on a previous episode was talking about how, women have the benefit, I'll say, of feeling the baby grow and connecting over time. And, it was my friend Matt. And he said, one day he's riding his bike in Central Park and the next day he's a dad. And he goes, and it was, I know that, there's obviously preparation and emotional and literal preparation that you go into. But it is really in that moment instantly when you weren't, and then you are forever a dad at the moment. So that's very true. If you could go back and speak to yourself in that time frame, just when your first child was born, having the benefit of this now time as a dad, what would you give yourself as advice in that moment that you think would have helped you along the path thus far for you?
Right. I mean, I remember that at some point when we were kind of getting really close to the birth, I had this sudden urge that I didn't quite know what to make of it, but something is about to end. I didn't have the triangle conversation at that point yet. And so I started partying like crazy and, kind of staying out late. And we would always have a discussion with my wife about, like, oh yeah, you need that, that's fine, sure, you won't be able to do this for a while, so why don't you do it? And so she was very understanding. But at the same time, the advice that I would give to myself, I guess, from here is, calm down. Nothing is going to end. it's not like you're going to have to make up for, partying for the rest of your life right now.
Sure.
You would do better to kind of focus on being present, focus on just, maybe be with her in a attentive and loving kindness sort of presence. You don't have to do anything, just be there a little more so that she doesn't have to kind of go through this alone. So there's a little bit of that I would say to myself. I think when I saw the baby, biology and neurochemistry is just amazing. I mean, it had such a strong effect on me, and immediately we kind of went into our mode of, let's think of ways of, what do you do, what do I do. And I began to do the bathing in the evening. We were rotating who's telling a story, and many times I was telling a story to my kids, and we were telling stories to my kids until when we moved here and my son was 10. I was still telling stories to him. So I think until the age of like 12 or 13. So that became like a really strong tradition in our family. And that was something that I kind of very much embraced. And I would make, so one of the things that we had is that we both read stories, but I often make up a story. So we had like an imaginary story about two little kids, that grow up in a very small countryside town in a very, very poor kind of imaginary country. And they're very talented. And then they go on all these adventures. And so every second night, basically, I would kind of continue with the story. And
Right.
they would really love it. Like, wow, what's happening with...
It's interesting too, because you speak about, presence, and that's been a consistent theme. And I suppose there could be a little bit of overlap, but if you were to think about, if you had an opportunity to do something differently since you became a dad, is there something that you would take, like a mulligan, that you would take and redo? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think, one of the things that happened is my son, the first one, was kind of very out of the ordinary. And he cried a lot. He had stomach aches. And we were the kind of parents who kind of just took him around all the time. So he came to parties to me. He came to festivals to me. I would be dancing and he would be on me, as I'm dancing there. So maybe that's unusual, maybe not. But when he cried and sort of became a nuisance for others, or like he would act in a certain kind of way, and some people just don't have the patience for it. Sure. So we would be sitting in a restaurant and they would kind of look at us and treat us in a certain kind of way. And I think those moments were kind of difficult for me. So I would stand up and kind of run out of the place and go outside and sort of angrily start walking to kind of let the steam off and help him to calm. But it was a lot about me too, that I wasn't able to be as relaxed as I would like to be. Okay. And so, the one thing I would probably do differently is to kind of relax into those moments and just be present for him and be present for myself or for others around me.
Yeah, that's a really important message, I think, is to, breathe into those moments when we feel reflexively stressed.
Yeah.
And, know also that there are people who get it and who understand and who are patient. And we travel a bit, you and I, so, we've been on those airplanes, and I always empathize with young parents, and they're like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's no problem. Like, it's like the baby's like, I'm going to wait till we take off. And exactly. Lose my mind. Like, as much as like my kids may have done that at some point, or yours, it's unavoidable and it's outside of our controls. So if you think about it, and you have a unique perspective on living, because you've lived in more than 2 countries, but you've been around the world, and being an immigrant to the U.S., would feel as a dad that has given you, in terms of perhaps an advantage and perhaps a challenge in the past 5 years or so?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's both. One of the things that we observed, with my wife is, helicopter parenting in the United States, which is, you're always kind of there. You're always kind of hovering around your kids. You want to be, so people are extremely protective. People are, one other thing is people are afraid of the nature and bugs, and like there are these crazy kind of notions about what a bug will do to you. And some of this is true. There are people who die from a bug bite, but to me it's like very extreme what we are seeing. So our kids have grown up with, I guess, less we are cautious, but we kind of let them do their thing and make their decisions, and they're not afraid of the nature and bugs, and they kind of look at other kids with strange eyes when they there's a bug there. So one of the advantages, I guess, is that I think we're afraid of less things. We're less anxious ourselves, and therefore we're less anxious about our kids. And that sort of gives them a lot of empowerment and self-confidence. I think the challenge is, what's very interesting is, and I didn't see this coming, was that when you move, your father, your parents, at least for a while, they're perceived like the authority, the one who knows the answers. But since we moved, and there's a new metric system, there's a new school system, there are new requirements, everything is different, very different. So therefore, we don't always have the advantage that normally a father would have. And so I have to learn the university system, the school system, the metric system. I still, somebody asked me, how much do you weigh? I still think in kilograms, and I have a moment of blank, like, oh, I don't know. So for them, at some point, what I observed is, they didn't come for advice as often as they would, because they were kind of like, well, maybe I know better. So for me to kind of begin to understand that, yes, I might actually ask my son sometimes about stuff, and he'll be better at it. He'll know the system better, or he'll know the word for it, and I don't. So that's an interesting dynamic. And again, it's probably something that I have to deal with. I'm hoping that, it didn't sort of affect them in a bad way. It's more for a father to have to put up with this, like, oh, you're not the one that knows best. Anyway, we are not, but.
Yeah, no, it brings up an interesting point about fallibility. And I think that, you and I had to touch on this in our previous conversation. How do you think being open and being vulnerable as a man with your kids helps inform them about themselves and contributes to how they identify with you as their dad?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very important one. As I spent some of my years, professional years as a therapist, and the kind of things that you hear from people are just mind blowing. People lose their temper all the time. They do things, mothers and fathers secretly think about just shoving their kid onto the floor, when they cry too hard. And people are very, very upset about it, because when you feel something like that, when you catch yourself angry at your son that you love the most, and maybe you overreact, then you judge yourself. And so that happened to me a lot. And as a therapist, I had the luck, or the luxury, to know that it happens to everybody. But people don't admit that, right? Like, me and my son, I've never. I'm always the best. I'm at my best. And so I knew that, it's not really true. And we all lose it a lot. But still, when I lose it, I have quite a temper sometimes, and I could shout. And then I feel really like, oh, so what am I going to do? What am I teaching him? And my wife always says, like, what are you teaching him? You're teaching him that, by raising your voice, you win the argument. Is that what you want to teach? And I'm like, well, no, it's not. So I had to kind of go back to my kids and apologize.
Sure.
And I think what I'm hoping that teaches is that, self-reflection, that we are fallible and it's okay and we have to accept it and it's not the end of the world, and we can apologize and we can start with a clean slate. It's not like we've ruined everything forever. So I'm hoping I'm teaching that. Right now it's very interesting because, again, as a psychologist, you learn about teenager years. So you do expect the emotionals, ups and downs, and the roller coaster. You do expect that, there are strong emotions present in your son. You know that they're going to have to gravitate out of the house and, be more with peers than with you. So all this is coming, right? But when it's here, man, it's hard to deal with it.
Yeah, even though it, and the reality is always a bit surprising, even though you're expecting it. It's never the timing that you imagined it to be. And
Yeah.
That's a great point. It's interesting because as you look at the totality of like your life in Hungary, and then I think you mentioned that you had lived in Israel for a while, and you have all these vast like cultural experiences that help inform you as a person in the world and as a dad, of course. And when you look at the very broad like zoom out of your legacy,
Yeah.
and what you want your children to know about you. So if you think about this in the future, 10 years, 20 years in the future, and your boys are speaking about you, perhaps in 20 years, they're speaking about you to their own kids and their family. And what would you like them to feel and be present in that moment 20 years from now about this specific time with you as their dad?
Yeah. I'm reflecting as you're asking me the question, and what I wanted to kind of say here as a continuation of the previous thought and the answer to your question is that teenager years are very demanding because, you were asking me, so what do you think you're teaching them, and what do you think they get out of this idea of humanity is fallible and but you can come back and all that. And
Sure.
I think what happens in teenager years is that all the things that you were teaching, you don't see them, or you see them in different contexts when they are with other people, but when they are with you, you don't see it. So you begin to question yourself, at least I do. Am I really doing a good job if he's not taking responsibility or not apologizing? What happened? I mean, I did. What have I done wrong? Why couldn't I pass the message on? So sometimes I have those kinds of self-doubts, and I have to kind of really maintain my state and meditate on it and kind of come back from it. And so, when you ask me the 20 years question, I hope that 20 years from now, they're going to say, well, our dad was always there for us. He was very, very present in our lives. He taught us to look for meaning in life, no matter what. He taught us that, there is no, like, you don't have to please the world, but you have to follow your bliss and passion and purpose, but then also do something for others to make a difference. And he was helping us to find our meaning. And, our family was a safe place where we could be whoever we wanted to be. And they were just cool people. If they said that, I would be very happy.
Yes, of course.
Because I think that would mean that they kind of find their own meaning and coolness and whatever that is.
Oh, that's great. You touched on so many important aspects of the experience of being a dad and the experience they're having of being your children in the context of the world. And there's so many things that are outside our control. There's so many things that we intend and land, as you said. And memory is a funny thing, right? So how you intend to parent and how they're receiving the parenting isn't always, perfectly, synchronized. So that's a good point. Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like one of the biggest dilemmas I have, I think, and probably humanity also has as a major dilemma is, this idea of how much you have to focus on your ego versus altruism, focusing on doing good for others. Because, just to say, okay, ego doesn't matter, I am here to serve others. I don't think that works in the sense that, like a young person, you have to find yourself first. You have to find your ego in a good way, who you are first, and then you can let go of it. But if you just start letting go of everything right away, that's not going to work. So how do we teach as fathers, the right amount of, okay, I need to stand up for myself. I need to know who I am. I need to what I stand for. And I need to do good things for others. So what's the balance?
It's exactly, you just said, you jumped into that key word. It's everyone trying to find that balance. And we all experience these things in motion, right? So, your life is continuing, your kids' lives are continuing, the world is continuing around it in the most macro sense, as well as specifically in your town and in their schools. So it's such a tumultuous balancing act to try to a tumultuous time to find a balance within. So you're juggling on a moving sidewalk, on a ship, and in a storm, and the ground is wet. So it's so many layers of this. It's funny, when my kids turned 18, I had a funny conversation with them, which is I told them, okay, like my role as your dad is going to evolve now. My role is largely, advisory. Your job is to now take the parenting from me and your mom and all the people around you and decide which aspects you're going to go forward with that are meaningful to you, and to learn from the things that we did well and learn from the things that we didn't do well. So it's now your option, like a menu to select and to try it on, see how it works, and go forward in life and tweak it. And I'll always be here for you.
Right.
And I may offer an opinion when not asked, but, and it's an important, empowering reality for them to see, okay, this is now their mantle, they can go forward and live their own lives. And, it's a challenge, I think, as a dad and as a parent overall, and family members and friends, to say, you have to do what's right for you. I'll support and respect you. I may not agree, but that's not really my job. Like, as I see it, my job isn't to, to bless everything they decide to do. It's, give you my,
Sure.
and then you have to do you.
One of the things that I realized, and it's probably the greatest lesson, again, something I knew conceptually, but when you live it is different, is that, you cannot really teach by giving advice. It's very limited. And so, keep doing things with your kids is the key. So, whenever we do something together, either the three of us, the two of us, or the four of us, and they see you acting in the role of a father, and let's say you're going to a theater and doing something, or having dinner and doing something, or they see you with your friends and they're there, that's the real kind of teaching, because I'm picking it up unconsciously. I'm seeing you do it, and that has an effect on me. But if I say to you, well, do this, do that, if I say that to them, the initial reaction from both of them, even though they're very different temperaments, is no.
Right. Reflex.
So quality time.
Yeah, and we had it as well.
Of course.
We may still have parts of it. So when someone tells us what to do specifically.
Exactly.
So we'll wrap up in a little. So if I were to ask you, with the sum total of all of your life experience and your experience as a dad now, part of the goal for this channel is to be a resource for dads and at all walks of life, different stages of being a dad. What advice would you give in a macro sense, like overall? Like, what do you feel is important if someone was seeing this and they're about to be a dad, or they're a dad to young children or older children having challenges? Like, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I think, maybe two things. One has to do with, parenting. It's like leadership. When you're a new leader, you always think about, okay, so what are the tricks and tips and tools that I can get those guys to do what I want? So, many parents kind of, that's how you start. Like, okay, so I got to get this thing here, this little thingy that I love, to be a carbon copy of me and do what I want. So forget that. And instead, just be there as a mentor and watch and let somebody grow with patience. And as a mentor, encourage curiosity, model the curiosity, and keep the channel open the whole time. One of the things that can happen is if they think that you cannot be told about something that they, screwed up, or, they didn't do, or they want to do differently than you think is the right thing to do. If they can't tell you that, they'll lie. And, one of the other nights, we were having this conversation, and my son says, you don't know how many kids lie to their parents. I don't lie to you. Appreciate it. And we were like, yeah, thank you. But that's really the idea. Like, maybe I'm not liking what I'm hearing, but it's the truth. So, don't lie. Don't make them have to lie to you. Forgive and be there as a mentor. That's the best you can do.
That's great. That's great. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Mickey. Thank you very much. I know you have a lot of balls in the air today, and you will soon be in the air as well. Have a fantastic holiday. And for those of you that are new, I ask you to please subscribe. There's a YouTube, either this side or this side, a little red YouTube. Click on that. And I'll link Mickey's podcast and other information below as well. So thanks again, Mickey. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonscott. It was a real pleasure to be here, and I hope everybody got something out of this, or at least if I triggered your mind with something, glad to have been here.
Excellent. Thank you so much.